There we go. So, welcome to the LGBTQ Youth in Ministry, creating creating safe spaces. There we go. Let's have Sherry introduce yourself to the group.
Yeah. Yeah, my name is Sherry Paranon. I have been in youth ministry. I'm in my 28th year of youth ministry, working with youth. Um, and I have just had a passion in the last probably 5 to 10 years of just working with students that identify with the LGBTQ plus community. Um, I was part of a church that was very conservative, and so my approach was very conservative. And so I really wanted to, I saw some um, problems in my approach, and I wanted to be different and trying to find a different way to just minister well. So that's where my passion is. That's kind of what we'll be talking about today. And so, yeah, I'm in Oakland, California, San Francisco Bay Area. So, um, yeah, we got good food here. I love it.
And what's your current church
That's me.
setting situation?
Good. Yeah. I've been on sabbatical about a year. So I resigned from the church that I was at last May. I went on a 1 year sabbatical. And then, so now my husband and I have been going to different churches in the Bay Area. And so now I'm in the process of interviewing and with another church and figuring out the rest of my life. So yeah, that's kind of where I am right now.
Awesome.
I should bring this up. I am the executive director of an organization called the Bay Area Youth Leaders Coalition. So we started in 2019. We gather youth pastors in the Bay Area, just trying to network, help pastors feel like they're not alone, youth workers feel like they're not alone. So, yeah, I'm a part of that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And Bill, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. My name is Bill White, and I am in Long Beach, California. I've been working off and on with LGBT youth, mostly college students, but some teens and younger kids too. I'm a pastor at a church now, co-lead pastor. But kind of through the decades, done some did the reparative therapy movement, kind of pray the gay away stuff. And now our church is very diverse, has a lot of LGBT folks in it. So I conduct gay weddings now, and support folks who are celibate, and folks who are conservative and in mixed orientation marriages. So it's kind of run the gamut for me a little bit. Um, and then I'm the executive director for Small Church Big Table, which is trying to create space for these conversations where there's not judgment. People get to ask their questions and be wherever they are on their own spiritual journeys, because we recognize that people come from all over, and we're all trying to sort out how we can love love youth in the name of Jesus a lot better.
Awesome. So, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Our hope today is to just equip you to help you foster safe and Christ-centered spaces for the LGBTQ youth that you might be working with. Sherry, do you want to take like just a minute and go over like a brief overview of what we're going to cover today?
Yeah, mainly what we'll be covering is safe spaces. We'll be covering like what does that term mean? There's a lot of language that's used, and depending on where youth workers are at theologically, there can be some misconceptions of certain language. So we'll use certain language that may even be triggering to some of you. And so it's just we're trying to help people understand what we mean when we say certain things. And so hopefully, that will be clear on those things. And if there's questions, even throughout this whole time, please put that in the chat. And then at the end, we'll save a good time for those questions, especially with a small group like this. We can have more discussion, which is obviously way better when we're having a discussion. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about just the reality of LGBTQ and church plus and church. Just some thoughts of how students feel and some challenges they have, challenges that the church has, youth workers, parents. We'll also be talking about what it means to create a place of belonging to all of your students, and just some practical ministry. And when we're talking about the practical ministry, um, I do want to say this just to preface this in the beginning. This is an area where we're all working on this. We're all there might be things we do today that tomorrow we're like, ah, that does not work anymore. And so, or there might be things that you guys are doing that, you know, especially with practical ministry that I haven't done and works really well now. So I really want those of you that are watching this to feel part of that conversation as well. So, you know, when we get to the practical stuff, I'll remind you as well, but put your ideas out there too. And yes, practical. Bill will talk a little bit about just kind of theological stuff. There's a lot of uh, Small Table Big Church has a lot of other resources for that, so he'll direct you to those things because that's a big conversation, and we don't want to take too much time on the theological side because we want to really help youth workers understand how to minister to students and not get so caught up in this is my theology, so I have to do it this way. So we're trying to have this conversation. And I know there's so many emotions that come with that. I've been in many conversations where people feel like I shouldn't have this conversation. And so it's just trying to have the conversation, not trying to tell any of you that you have to believe a certain way theologically. You're working with your students. You are the heartbeat of your ministries. So, you know, we're trying to leave that to you and the Lord. So, so we'll do that, and then we'll have a time of questions. So that's what it'll look like. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna put two notes in the chat. Um, One, like we've said, please feel free to put questions in anytime. But also, like Sherry mentioned, if you have a story or some advice for something that's worked, or even something that you've tried and that didn't work, we'd love to hear those in the chat as well. And then also throughout this process, please be respectful. This is a place where you can ask questions. But if anything gets aggressive, we'll probably bump you from the chat. And also, just a quick plug, if you are interested in some a deeper dive into the theology, we do have an upcoming webinar in July on July 15th, where we're just focusing on scripture. So I'll put the link in the chat right there. But yeah, let's get into understanding what do we mean by safe space, right? And I think Sherry, you're gonna take this one.
Yeah. This term safe space, I think I would probably say maybe 5 to 10 years ago, that became just a common phrase in our language. Early on in ministry, it wasn't even something we talked about or thought about. And so the way that I would identify a safe space in a youth ministry is every student that comes into your doors desires to feel safe when they come into your doors. And what that means is they are the ones determining, is this a place I can be myself? And I'm not even talking about LGBTQ students at this point. I'm talking about all students. All students walk into your youth building or your church and says, and sit, you know, whether they literally say it to themselves or not, they are determining, is this a place where I can feel comfortable, where I can ask questions, where I can be loved and valued and seen? They are the ones to determine whether your place is or my place is safe for them. So one of the things that I did for a long time is I tell my students, I desire, we met in a firehouse building, an old firehouse, very cool building. And I would tell them, I desire for this building, this place to be a safe space for students. I would never say this is a safe space for students because they're the ones to determine whether it is or not. And let's say I'm up front and I'm like, this is a safe space for students. And a kid came in and just was offended by or hurt by something, or somebody said something mean to him, or whatever it is. And they're like, this is a safe space. Okay, no, I don't want to, you know. So the language I used was, it was my desire to be, for this place to be a safe space. So that's when we're talking about the building and the room and the environment of a youth building. or youth ministry. That's what I mean about the overall term safe space. Um, when we're thinking of ministering to students with the gospel message, I think of Philippians 2:3, and it says this: do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself. And that verse to me communicates, it's not about me making sure that I tell students what I want them to believe theologically. Probably about 5 years ago, I really was like, how am I going to minister to LGBTQ plus students? Like, I'm not doing it right. Like, I can just tell it's not working. And so for a while, my prayer was, God, help me to view people the way that you view them. And that was my prayer over and over again. Every time I had an event or an outreach thing, God, help me to see these students the way that you see them. And so God, over the years, just kind of changed my heart to just see people differently, not in a way of like, I have to tell them these things or they're going to go to hell. I have to tell them these, like, it just became almost more calming and more like, I love you and I want you to know the hope and freedom we can find in Jesus. Like, my heart changed, if that makes sense. And so there's a way that we have to approach what a safe space looks like. And we'll talk a little bit more practically in a little bit, but um, that idea of safe space is really important. And I've had a lot of youth workers go, no, we need to stop thinking that way. And I disagree. I think it's really important, not just for LGBTQ plus students, but all students that they feel valued and seen in the space that they come into.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Sherry.
For sure.
Bill, how would you explain like some misconceptions on what an actual safe space is? Like Sherry was talking about saying versus showing.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I'm gonna in some ways disagree with you, Sherry, but
That's
hopefully
okay.
in a kind and helpful way. We'll see. But it's hard to create a safe space for everyone, right? Like
Mhm.
how I like some of us have like tr do translation during service, like into a different language, into Mandarin or to Spanish or something like that. But do you translate into every language? Like, no, you have limits, right? There's certain limits. And so how do you do that, right? I think that's the question. And that's what we're obviously talking about here. Um, so when Paul writes in Romans 15:7 to accept one another as Christ accepted you, I had a mentor who showed this picture. It helped me understand like it's really hard to, it's tricky in the church. And it might be just that in a local congregation, how wide can your embrace be? So he showed this picture of kind of the range of ministry, talking from conservative, um, folks who are very conservative to moderately progressive to very progressive. And what he argued was that you can really only do two boxes at any time. You can't get them all four. They just don't work. So you can do two boxes, and that's as far as you can stretch. One of the challenges I bet most of the folks in this call experience is that maybe your church are these two boxes. The adults are moderate conservative or very conservative, but your youth ministry is down here. Your youth ministry is also moderate conservative, but you have some moderately progressive, you have some affirming kids, right? Or some queer kids who are out or this is where your congregation is. And again, youth are going to be typically more progressive. And so now, so you've got some conservatives and some progressive, and there might be a little bit of tension in the adult ministry areas. And down in kids, you're like, oh my gosh, we're all affirming. All the kids are affirming. Yeah, there might be the outlier who's not, but what do we do in that space? And so, how do you create space for your kids when they're a little bit different than the adult congregation? In fact, that's one of the questions already in the chat that we'll come around to here in a bit because it's not easy to make space for everyone.
Real quick, can you remind us whose theory that was that you just shared?
So I don't know where it actually came from.
Okay.
But Mike Goldsworthy shared it with me, and he stole it from somebody else who stole it from somebody else. You know, it's ministry. It's just four
Yeah.
bucks.
Y'all still things.
Yeah, yeah. So that's all. Good question, Dave. Sorry, I wish I knew. Um, Part of it is, so let me, so think about um, the idea of empathy and pronouns. All right. So do we use pronouns for kids who say, hey, I'd like to use they, them pronouns, for example? Um, what does it look like to accept kids the way we've been accepted? What's that going to look like in your ministry setting? Is that going to set the whole church on fire? Might be one question. Um, Typically, if you're down in this space, both in the progressive and progressive space in youth ministry, I mean, it's pretty easy to use they, them pronouns. In this middle space, that's going to be more of the question. And the upper space is going to feel more dangerous and it might actually cause issues for the youth. So in this middle space, do you use they, them pronouns? What does hospitality look like? By and large, our practice at our church has been you always want to extend the greatest welcome to the people on the furthest margin.
Hmm. Love that.
And so that means yes, you do. And you can take time and explain that from up front, or you can use your own pronouns and explain why you use like, hey, I use he, him pronouns. Um, and so anyway, but that's just a thought and we can talk more about that later.
Yeah. Thank you. Um,
David, I wanted
Sherry, do
to
you want
quickly
to push
answer.
back on
sure,
that at
sure.
all?
Yeah, I'm
My
gonna fight you back. No. Um, I wanted to answer Julian's comment just oh, it went away. But it was basically asking what was the pushback when people disagreed about the safe spaces. I think there was the pushback that I have received was it was almost like if somebody created a safe space, it meant the kids could just go do whatever they wanted. Or if there was a safe space, it meant they had to get rid of that the youth pastor had to get rid of their theology. And I wouldn't say that I want to be clear that it doesn't mean those things. It means what are these needs that students are having? And usually that safe space is, can I have a conversation without feeling judged? Am I going to be listened to? Am I going to be cared for? Or are people just going to, give me their opinions? Sometimes we have people in our life that will just instead of listening to us, like we may not want a problem to be solved. My husband and I go through this a lot, and we'll say, do you want me to solve the problem or do you want me to just listen? And most of the time we just want to be listened to, right? We're not necessarily wanting the problem to be solved. We need to be heard first. And so but that was one of the things that is really common, that people kind of feel like that safe space means I have to give up all my beliefs, and it doesn't mean that. So yeah. And then Bill, somebody wants a picture of that chart. So
Yeah, you
however
bet.
you can put that in the,
Yeah, we can send it in the email when it goes out.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
cool. Thank you.
Cool.
Let's move on. In the New Testament, we have a lot of examples of disagreement in the church, and the way that it's tackled is by hearing stories of real people. And today we have a lot of statistics of real people that we can use as some stories to help um, shape the way that we approach ministry. And Sherry was wondering if you wanted to share with us a couple of stats that you found helpful in framing your perspective here.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has really helped me in my journey of trying to understand the LGBTQ plus community, and not even just that community, but students in general that are dealing with anxiety and depression and all those things, is just realizing um, suicide ideation, mental health challenges, all those different things. All of us on here that work with students know those are like, we'll put the stats when we send out the emails so you guys have that evidence. But we all know that this is an issue in our ministries. And for me, I wanted to do the work. I wanted to do the research of understanding what students are going through, how some of these issues can be more mental health issues. And I wanted to approach and be careful with my language, because my language could be hurtful rather than, or it could be, yeah, harmful rather than helpful.
Yeah.
And that was really where I started to go, okay, let me go research some of these issues. Let me start digging into some of these things as opposed to kind of thinking things black and white. So for me, suicide, mental health were the things that I just, those stories, my own. I lost my brother to suicide 8 years ago. I dealt with my own anxiety. Those kind of walking with students, years and years with anxiety, seeing a lot of differences in the last 10 years with those things. Um, like I could tell it was radically different than, 10 years ago, or sorry, 15, 20, 25 years ago of ministry. So I wanted to work with the students that I was ministering to now. So um, hopefully that kind of answers that question. But those were the two things that were really areas that those statistics made me want to be better, be a better leader, be a better minister, be more patient with students and not jump to conclusions. So, yeah,
Yeah.
is my
Thank
thought.
you. Um,
I'll throw out one other statistic on this that
sure.
really struck me. So, PRRI did a big national study 18 months ago on why people leave churches. And perhaps some of you saw this in the news, but 47% of all the people who responded who had left their church in the last year said that it was because of their harsh treatment of the LGBTQ community. So that's 47%. So when the lower you go, the younger you go in the poll, the higher that percentage is, right?
Yeah.
And so in some ways it's an evangelism issue, it's a church retention, church growth issue, it's a human issue, but the statistics are pretty clear that it's a real issue, and our culture is really shifting with the current administration and its strong pushback on LGBT issues. And so some churches are shifting further away from LGBT inclusion, and others are sort of protesting more. Or it's a very fraught time for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Um, do I
Yeah.
you might not know this, Bill, but off the top of your head, were other issues that people mentioned anywhere near
No,
47%?
no, that was by far the highest.
It's
So.
really, really interesting.
Mhm.
Um, so how do you go about creating this culture of belonging, that place where the youth will feel safe? Sherry?
I'm sorry, my internet went a little wonky. Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, yeah. How do
So,
you go about creating that culture of belonging?
okay. Yeah. I think it first starts with your heart as a youth worker. Um, and your heart, what I mean by that is like, what are you trying to accomplish? And obviously we'll all say, well, we want to lead people to Jesus. But we need to be willing to say, my approach could be wrong. And how, if it is wrong, I want to make sure to research, to be open, to be listening. Um, Let me start to research more about this LGBTQ community. What do these terms mean? What are they dealing with? What is my student really saying when they're identifying with a certain letter? Um, as opposed to kind of being quick to say, no, I'm not going to do these things. I think of the pronoun issue. I faced that in my last church. And to me, it was not a hill I was going to die on. I had to get to a place where I was like, let me pick and choose my battles here in order to make a student feel safe, in order to continue to build that relationship with a student. Um, that's just wasn't going to be an issue that I chose to die on. So I looked at it as for students to come and tell me this was their pronoun. Great. Thank you so much for telling me. Like I wasn't going to approach it with like, no, you have to be this because this is what you were born with. It just wasn't helpful. It was harmful actually. It told the person this is not a safe person. And how that person is being perceived, I think of myself as a missionary. When we think of missionaries and you go into these different places, we missionaries spend years getting to know the culture so that they can find the language to communicate to this culture who Jesus is. That kind of changed my perspective of let me get to know this culture and this community. And I continue to do this with students, all the like language that they use now, the things that they talk about now, like, instead of me just being like, well, that's dumb, like, I'm not going to do that. I want to know and learn what they're growing up in so that I can minister well to them. Um, so I think it's also important to know these issues are not black and white. And I used to really think it's black and white. It's in scripture. This is what it says. Everything's black and white. And when I really started studying the life of Jesus in a deeper way, I started to realize, oh, it's not black and white. Jesus is not black and white. So what does that mean? Like, how do I really wrestle with those things? So that really helped me to I want to say calm down, but I think before I would just kind of be so like it has to be this way that it once I started to realize how I talk to some people, how do I talk to students is not always black and white. And I'll talk a little bit about this later on, but
Yeah.
yeah, those were things that were just helpful in hopefully I answered your question, but
Yeah.
yeah,
So your mindset in approaching students is focus on the relationship with them.
yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
Relationship first.
Yeah.
How do I know that student even like where are they if I don't know them and they're new, right? And they share things with me. How do I know they even know who God is? How do I know their perception of God? How do I know a lot of things? Like, you know, or their journey, even if they've been raised in the church, how do they view God now? Like what are they going through? And so it really takes a long time of building that relationship with a student to start to have these conversations theologically
Yeah.
and start to use the language in a healthy way.
Which is an old ministry concept anyway, when, people used to stand on the street corners with a bullhorn preaching
Yeah.
damnation, and
Yeah.
then I don't know why, but we actually had to do studies about actually getting to know people, and sharing your life with them is the better way to
Yeah.
evangelize people. Um, Bill,
Right.
how do you go about like creating this atmosphere of empathy and respect?
Yeah, I mean, Jesus always starts with questions. I mean, he's, the maker of the universe, and here he's asking us questions. Like, what do you want? I mean, that's the first
Mhm.
question in the Gospel of John. What do you want? Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. So I mean, I love what Sherry said.
Yeah.
Uh, the only time Jesus starts with sin is with the religious leaders. So that would be those of us on this call that Jesus would be confronting, not students. But I was thinking when you asked the question about, how do you create a culture of welcome? What came to my mind, and this is a little off track, so we can stop here. But I thought about how culture changes, and culture changes in churches. And culture has changed in every church represented here. I mean, unless your church is like 6 weeks old. Um, and I was thinking a little bit about the New Testament and the whole idea of food sacrificed to idols, which was a huge cultural issue. Which how many people preach about, don't eat food sacrificed to idols? Um, but if you look at that cultural issue throughout the course of the New Testament, so in the Galilean countryside in 30 AD, Jesus declares all foods clean. Okay. But then you've got the council in Jerusalem 15 years later, 48 AD, something like that, saying, don't eat food sacrificed to idols. That food is not clean. And then 10 years later in the 50s, you've got Corinthians and Romans, right? First Corinthians 8 through 10 and Romans 14 and 15 saying, actually, all food's clean. And then if you push ahead into the book of Revelation, chapter two, mostly chapter three, the church in Thyatira and Pergamum, right, in what's now Turkey in the 80s or maybe early 90s, Jesus is saying some food's unclean again. Like issues shift throughout geography and culture, and they shift in our church. And so how we handle these things is going to be a little bit different 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And so can we hold that humility and like what Sherry is saying, keep it centered on Jesus, building the relationship, recognizing that culture is going to shift a lot of the other stuff.
Yeah. How do
Yeah.
you hold on to truth while you're sharing love to those students?
I mean, I kind of think whatever I say is true, so I feel like everyone should just hold on to that.
Knows all.
But
Yeah.
what, I mean, like some people probably have like a directive from their church, but a lot of people are here because the big church has no policy or concept, like they haven't touched it. And you're in youth ministry getting the questions first.
Yeah. I mean, I
I'll
mean, I
jump in while
think
Bill's thinking of that.
with,
One of the things I
okay.
was thinking of is it's really important to study for ourselves the topic on all sides, study theology on all sides. I think sometimes we can have our opinions based on what we've grown up with or what people have told us. But if we really haven't done that research for ourselves, then we kind of are creating this, here's my opinion, but we don't we don't know what the other side is thinking. Like for me, to be able to have studied both sides of the argument and realize there's Christians on all sides, people that love Jesus, people that we're going to be in heaven with for eternity. So, okay, like let me not make people an enemy because they think differently than I do. Um, so I think that I don't know if I like went in a different direction than what you were hoping for, David, but that was just something that I was thinking of.
No,
Yeah.
I feel great about that. I I want to so we recognize that people are on this Zoom from a range of theological perspectives. Okay. Um, so let me just share something. David, do you have the slide from New Life Fellowship? Can you drop that in the chat? So this is a longer piece, but this is New Life Fellowship, which is a guy named Rich Viotas, which is a moderately conservative evangelical church. And this is how they respond to folks in their new members class. They say, New Life believes that every human being, including our LGBTQ friends, family members, neighbors, and everyone else, are image bearers of God and worthy of love, respect, and hospitality. As a church family, we are deeply committed to initiating and maintaining conversations around these questions, first from a posture of relationship before position. One of the things that we endeavor to do when wrestling with complex and potentially polarizing issues is to not to respond with biblical proof texting and oversimplistic thinking. We are all called to live with humility and curiosity, discerning what discipleship to Jesus looks like for each person, no matter how one identifies. From a theological perspective, New Life Church holds to the historic biblical understanding of marriage as between a man and a woman. We aspire for this conviction to be held with compassion and humility, and we recognize that many have come to a different conclusion on this matter. Now, I find that a very gracious response. They say, theologically, this is where we stand. We recognize people differ. We want to not proof text. We want to have conversation. We want to build relationships. And I love that response. So that's, I think, the kind of thing where they have a conviction, but they're holding it with humility. So like in our church, I mean, I've done multiple gay weddings this year. So obviously we have a conviction that that is an available means of grace for folks in the LGBTQ community to follow Jesus, is to enter into a monogamous, covenantal, lifelong, servant-hearted, Jesus-centered marriage. Um, and we have people in our congregation who disagree with that, and which we feel great about. We have people in leadership who disagree with that, which we feel great about. So we have our conviction. So part of it is how do you distinguish between core beliefs and convictions? And that's the crux of the matter. When it comes to opinions, like what color is the carpet, we all know that we can disagree. The difference is between core convictions, I mean, core beliefs and convictions. Because core beliefs, that's what we hold central for us. That's the Apostles' Creed, for example. Convictions, we see those things differently.
Yeah. That's a great
Good.
example statement. Thanks for sharing.
Hmm.
Sherry, do you want to take us into some practical things for you know, people
Yeah.
in youth ministry? Like what were things that you tried in your church?
Yes, I'm going to share some things. And also, I would just say for those of you out there, like, please add your stuff too, because we're all in this together. We all are trying new things. And so there might be things that you're like, don't do that or whatever. So it might not work in your context. Um, so, and if you have thoughts on how to do things, I would say to, if you are in charge of your ministry, or maybe you're watching this and for your youth pastor, I would start by training your leaders and your parents in mental health classes. That will really help. Just kind of give people much more of an understanding. So, mental health training classes are really important. Keep this conversation the forefront of your ministries. Depending on where you're located in the culture of your ministry, this might not be as big of an issue, but I'm sure you're on here because it is an issue. And so, having these conversations in your staff meetings, making sure people feel like it's just keeping the conversation going is really important. Because sometimes I feel like churches, because this conversation is so hard, that it's just like, let's not deal with it. But that doesn't help either. So, keeping that conversations going, bringing in professionals to come and talk to your leaders on these issues is really important. Um, when it comes to students that will come to you and say, they come out to you, they share a pronoun. I always What has helped me is to say thank you so much for sharing that with you. I just feel blessed that you feel safe enough to share that with me. No matter what my opinions are on what they're sharing with me. My opinions at that point don't matter. What matters is that this student felt that I was safe enough to say that. So I just want to leave it at that. Um, Not all LGBTQ plus issues are the same. I've said that earlier. So it is important to not, like, if you hold a stance, a traditional stance, of gay being gay and having a homosexual relationship is a sin. There are people that are part of the LGBTQ plus community that are not having those relationships that still identify as that. And um, Big Table, Small Church Big Table has those. I don't know if you put those out there, Bill, but there's been some great webinars that have shown those conversations happening, and I'm like, they're just really helpful. So having that research is really important. I think teaching students how to read scripture is really important. A lot of times, as youth workers, we're kind of like, let me teach you what God's word says, and then we leave it at that. Here's the message, we're done. But true discipleship is helping people to understand how to read scripture, to understand the context of what we're reading, and to also help people to understand we're not God, so we could actually be wrong in what we're communicating. When we give that space to say, let's have a conversation about scripture, um, then that gives students much more of a place of like feeling safe because they're feeling like they could be heard. Or just like Bill, when we started, was like, I disagree with that. Great. Like that's okay to disagree. Like the Jewish groups in the Old Testament, even New Testament, they would get together and argue over it all the time. What is the scripture saying? What are we trying to understand here? So that can be really healthy as long as it's in love and care and value of the other person. Um,
Yeah.
I think some of these, what I would say when it comes to practical ministry with camps, obviously, there's some camps that set it up. They're the ones that set up their rules for camp. But if you are setting up your rules, what I did was it was just gender by birth. Honestly, in when I was going through ministry, I didn't come across students that were like, I have to be in this cabin, um, and were upset that they had to be in a different cabin, because they changed their gender. They just went, and it was as long as they felt valued and cared for by the people in their cabin, they were fine with that. Now, maybe some of you have situations where it's different, but I have had some youth pastors that have their camps in an open room, so everybody's sleeping in the same room. Um, bathroom issues, those things like that. Private stalls, we're kind of seeing when we're going to, Whole Foods or shopping or anywhere, hotels, like everybody just has private rooms, and it's just easy and not an issue. Um, so I think one of the things that I'll just kind of close up with that is, every student has a different way of viewing certain things. So that's why I'm saying it's not black and white. Get to know your students, get to know what makes them feel safe. Don't assume and go from one pendulum to the other and assume this is what it has to be. Like, if you don't need to worry about certain things, if you don't need to worry about the bathroom issue because that isn't an issue right now, then don't worry about that. But getting to know your students and what they need and how they can feel safe is really most important. And so, in order to do that, you have to have the conversations with students and create those safe spaces. Um, yeah, so I'll kind of end with that.
Awesome. Now before we get into the Q&A section, and Bill, feel free to jump in if you want to add, but I do want to just give a quick plug for some of the resources that we provide at Small Church Big Table. If your church, or even if you and maybe a couple of your leaders are wrestling with how to move forward, what position to take, um, or you just want some more resources because you don't know where you want to stand theologically, you want to hear some more stories, we offer some small group cohorts, and that can either be you could join a group of, I think we do mostly less than 10 people, and that are from,
Mhm.
all different sorts of churches, or we also offer them for church leadership. So we can have, like the church staff on there, or some people from your board or your elders, and just create a very confidential and small community for the key leaders at your church to have those same kind of conversations, but just as a small group from your staff. So it's a little more intimate. And then even further, if maybe you're past that and you know where you want to get, but you're uh, struggling to lay out a practical plan, or you just have some questions to help get that jump started. Bill also offers some coaching through Small Church Big Table, where you can kind of like set up some sort of arrangement with him of like, is it a phone call once a month or once a week, or, video chat and things like that. So if you are ever interested in either of those, and that might be now, that could be, a year from now or even more, but that is available. We don't want you to feel like, you're alone in this. And we also don't want to
Yeah.
push any agenda. We have stories from, like Bill said, like all sides of the spectrum. And we're able to help you have those conversations and share how lots of other churches are doing it, and help you pick and figure out what's best for your community. So
Yeah.
that is available.
Yeah. Thanks, David.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I would
Yep.
jump in. I know Sarah is now riding in the car, but she did have she started off with the kicked off the first
Yeah.
question. I can't actually find, but I think it was, my child has come out. Should I stay in my church,
Yeah.
or should I go? Which it was actually one of the questions that someone sent in on the registration as well. Should I stay in my church? Should I go? We've we've had some conversations around this. We probably need to do a webinar on it, David,
Yeah.
about when to stay, when to go, because it's not like, oh, well, obviously you go or obviously you stay. I mean, sometimes your queer kid has more support in their conservative church youth group, even though your queer kid's affirming, or maybe you're affirming. Um, and pulling them out would actually reduce their support. Or maybe they're still sorting through their theology and this is a better place to do it. Or maybe this feels dangerous to them. I think when it starts to feel dangerous to them, or when they feel like, um, and you as a parent read the signs like, wow, they're disconnecting from God or from family or from themselves.
Yep.
That's when you're like, look, I'm 45 years old. I'm going to have plenty of time to go back to church after my teenager, moves out of the house or whatever. Like, I'll go to a church where my kid wants to go and try to
Yeah.
pursue finding Jesus there. So that's my initial thought, but obviously it's a very complicated question. And Sarah, I will send you that resource that has a friend of mine did a panel on 10 key questions to ask, and then there are a couple of great resources. There's a wonderful book that's actually a New York Times bestseller specifically about this issue.
Awesome.
I would just add too, like having conversations with your lead pastor, having conversations with, the youth workers, the small group leaders, like those are the conversations that have to start before you're like, ah, I'm just out. There's been times where I've had, just like you gave the examples of Bill, like you have students that feel safe in the group, and I've had students that just feel safe, and it's because they have leaders that are walking with them. And then I've had students that are teased and made fun of, and they're like, I don't want anything to do with God anymore. And so for me, I've been like, this is not a healthy place for you. I don't think that that's black and white. I think there's some navigating that has to be done, which is what you had said, Bill. So, yeah.
Yeah. Um, for LGBTQ youth who are coming to a church that is welcoming, but they're bringing a lot of church trauma or disappointment with them, what resources or how would you encourage those youth leaders to minister to those students?
Gently.
Yeah. I think it takes time. I think it takes therapy. Um, and I think there's giving the student space to be able to share their thoughts. So maybe taking them to coffee or whatever they, boba, things that they like to do, and just, talking through those details of where they were hurt. Um, I think directing people towards God and seeing the difference between, like, we all make mistakes, right? We're all human. So every church is getting it wrong at some level. So when we are able to help people understand that God is bigger than we all think he is, or we all, um, you know, live out our lives, we live in a way that sometimes we make God smaller. And so, um, you know, it just takes a lot of time and a lot of healing and a lot of processing. I would also say, like, we haven't talked about parents, but it is really important to connect and make sure parents are the primary. And sometimes we can kind of create in youth ministry, like parents are the enemy because of whatever. But we really need to make sure that we're partnering with parents, walking alongside parents, because they're the ones that are living with their kid day in and day out. And so we want to help give them the language that's needed so their kid feels safe at home. We want to be able to sit down with coffee and listen to the parents and their thoughts on these things. Um, so you're not just walking with that students, you're walking with their parents too. Now, if you're part of some ministry that, there's not really parents involved, or then it's maybe a different story. But
Right.
yeah, those are just a couple thoughts.
Hey,
Yeah.
I would just to circle back. I mean, one thing that's helpful in big church as well as in youth group is if whoever's teaching, regardless of your theology, is you can mention LGBT people in a positive light,
Mhm. Yep.
and it's just normal. Like, yeah, my gay friend Jimmy. So we went out to baseball the other day, and he said the funniest thing about kids and how kids, like you just let people know you've got a gay friend. You're,
Um,
you know.
and on that route, do you want to share? We also had a question about how to minister specifically to trans youth, given how much they're in the news, like trans people have been in the news lately. Do you want to share a
Mhm.
practical uh,
Yeah.
tip on that?
Yeah, I actually do want to jump in real quick. I'm going to tell a story and then Sherry, you can actually give principles. So um, there's a family in our church that has they have four kids. They have two of them are trans, teenagers, 18, and a kid who is 9, so or 10. Um, and they weren't sure about the teenager, but they knew ever since birth, like they could just tell, like this kid was just different. This kid, and the younger child's also on the spectrum, which is very common for folks who are on the spectrum, who like a third of kids on the spectrum identify as LGBTQ. So anyway, so they were not surprised one day after church the kid came up to mom and said, "Hey mom, I think I'm just like this woman Dove, except the other way. And this is as like a 6 year old. And mom's like, tell us about that. Well, you know how Dove, we call her her, but she's also a boy, but she has long hair. Like, I think I'm a boy, even though I'm a girl. Like, so as a 6 year old, she's articulating this. Um, and, the parents are super smart. I mean, just educators and just and so they've gone on this journey of not mandating things to start, doing nothing permanent with either child, but allowing social transition, exploring that, talking with teachers. And it's been a fantastic experience for that family. In fact, they go to our church and the kid who's now 9, I guess it might be 10, but said recently, mom had to go to the school and say, hey, there's some issues in the classroom and this, that, and the other. And so mom is talking with her son and says, hey, just so um, at school, some of the kids may not always be that thoughtful, and they may say things that might be mean. And so I just want to prepare you because I heard that this might happen over in this other classroom, and I just want to let you know. And the kid's like, Mom, 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 I know not everyone goes to church because at his church, he gets to be who he is. And that was the place where he first wanted to try his new pronouns.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, that's just a story.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there are also stories of folks in our church where the kids said, hey, maybe, I want to shift genders. And the parents are like, let's wait on that. And it's faded.
Yeah.
And that's a thing too.
So know your kid
Know your
is,
kid.
yeah. No, I thank you for that story. I think it's super helpful. I was also thinking of a easy demonstration to just help create a safe space and a nod to trans folk would be um saying your pronouns when you introduce yourself.
Yeah,
And that's just, you know, like you said, speaking to my gay friend and tell a story, and just those little moments, they might not even be picked up on by 100% of your kids, but the ones who need to hear it will hear it, and they will be impressed by that and feel
yeah,
a part of the group by hearing those things.
for sure. For
Can
sure.
I add something real quick?
Yeah.
Coming from a conservative background, I wasn't allowed to say any of that stuff up front. So the church was not affirming, and so I wouldn't be allowed to say my pronouns in an upfront way. Um, but I think a way to get around that could be, you can kind of identify certain students that might, like, there might behavioral things that you're like, okay, you might be part of the LGBTQ plus ish community. So what I've done is I've asked, like, what, or if they have a friend, like, what's your friend's pronouns, as a way to help them know, like, I'm here to walk with you and I'm not going to judge you. So sometimes if you're part of a conservative community, you may not be able to say some certain things in an upfront way, but there's things one-on-one with students that you can say that can help them feel safe in that environment.
Yeah. In the chat registration, we had a handful of questions like that are specifically about theology. Oh, and I just want to put in and we'll put this in the email tomorrow too, but just another plug for the webinar that's coming up next month on theology specifically. Um, and we'll cover scripture, but we'll also spend a lot of time in Q&A on scripture. Um, I really like this question that someone submitted, and Bill or Sherry, either of you can answer or both. How can I be an affirming person rather than one who simply accepts?
Great question. What's the difference between affirming and accepting? Um, I think there's differing opinions on what that, may mean by some people. But I think for me, I would say my approach of affirming or walking with a student so that they feel valued. I try to steer away from the terms of affirming and accepting because I feel like there can be divisions and lines drawn, and then I'm just, it's just dismissed. And so I try not to, like, when people ask me questions, are you affirming? Are you condoning? Are you all these things? I try to be like, that's the wrong question, or that's a wrong way to look at it, where it's more about really making that student or person feel valued in who they are and meeting them where they're at. Do I care about them as a person? And sometimes people will say, well, if you cared about them as a person, you're going to say that what they're doing is wrong. That's not true. So walking with somebody and um yeah, I'll just kind of be quick on this as we're running out of time, but just
Yeah.
loving that person, learning, listening, saying less and listening more is always the best approach.
And we're gonna stick around. Oh, you want to
I
go
just
ahead?
want to say one thing. I,
Yeah.
I think hugs are huge. And when it's not appropriate to hug a hand on a shoulder, because it lets them know, like, particularly like I love hugging gay men. I'm like as straight as they come, but it's like I'm not scared of you. Like so many straight guys are scared of gay guys. Like, oh my gosh, what if they like me? You're like, just get over yourself. Like, just go up and hug. And like that, putting your hand on your shoulder and like, oh gosh, just the physical touch makes a
Uh,
huge difference.
yeah.
Yeah, side hugs. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would also say, I would also say too, it's important to ask the person because you don't know their journey. So, especially if it's with a student, you want to be able to
Right.
say, "Can I hug you?" Like, "Can I give you a hug?" Like, so you have to sense the moment.
Yeah.
I think you need 12 hugs a day for good mental health. That's been done some research there, so I think that is important. But
Yeah.
asking is really important too because it can come across weird if you.
We also do name tags and then colored dots that you can add to it to let people know if you don't want to be touched or you want to shake
Oh,
or,
that's awesome. I
yeah.
love that.
Um,
Cool.
I just want to say that a lot of these practical things that we've discussed for creating a safe space for LGBTQ youth is also just helpful in creating a safe space for all of your students to feel like they can ask questions, they can come to you when they have needs. And I really hope that you guys continue these conversations. We're going to send out resources and the recording of this tomorrow, but it'll have all of our contact info if you ever have questions or you're in a situation that you need some insight on. And yeah, we just want you guys to be the best equipped that you can for ministry. I'm gonna close us officially and stop the recording, but then we'll stick around if you have more questions, and you guys can unmute if you'd like, or you can still put stuff in the chat. So go and be great ministers to your students, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank
Super
you.
fun. Super
Go be
fun. Feel free to
Jesus.
stick on if you want to ask a question or chat or whatever.